My name is Sophie. I'm 26, and that morning I genuinely thought maybe, just maybe, my life was finally about to change. I had an interview with a tech company downtown, the kind of opportunity one had dreamed about for years. After countless late-night cafe shifts, tutoring weekends, and delivering groceries just to scrape by, this felt like the one shot that could finally make all of it worth it. I woke up early, laid out my blouse and blazer on the bed, polished my flats, and rehearsed my answers in the mirror. For the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Not fear. Not anxiety. Hope. Then Lila, my younger cousin, barged into my apartment without knocking. Sunglasses on, latte in hand, she smirked at me like I was the problem. "You have to take me to the city first. My friends are waiting." I froze. "I can't. My interview is in an hour," I said, trying to stay calm. She rolled her eyes. "You'll get another one. This is important for me." That's when my parents appeared, like clockwork, with the silent judgment I'd carried all my life. Their presence made my chest tighten, not fear exactly, but the familiar weight of being invisible in my own family. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. This wasn't just about an interview anymore. It wasn't just about a job. It was about finally standing up for myself and choosing to exist on my own terms, no matter what they thought. My father's voice cut through the room like a whip. "You're refusing to take Lila? After everything I've done?" His eyes were sharp, his jaw tight, and the anger radiated off him like heat. My chest tightened, but I refused to shrink. "I have my interview today. This is my chance," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He laughed. Not a small laugh, a cruel, mocking sound that made my stomach churn. "Your future? You have no future. Lila's life is real. Yours, well, you've always been disposable." Every word landed like a hammer against my chest. Then, before I could even process it, he shoved me back. My shoulder slammed into the wall, pain shooting down my arm. I stumbled, trying to catch myself, but the world narrowed into a blur of anger, fear, and disbelief. Lila leaned casually against the counter, chewing gum like she was watching a show, as if none of this mattered. My mother stood there quietly, her disappointment sharper than any scream. "Why do you always create trouble?" she muttered, not a word of protection, only blame. I could feel the familiar panic rising, the one that had always kept me small. But this time, it didn't take hold. Something inside me hardened. This wasn't just about the interview. This was about taking back control of my own life. I straightened my shoulders and looked at him, my voice trembling but steady. "I'm leaving. Now." He barked a laugh, like I'd just said something ridiculous. "Try it. Walk out that door. You'll regret it." But in that moment, I realized I had nothing left to lose. I reached for my keys, my hands trembling not from fear, but from the strange mix of adrenaline and clarity that had settled over me. My father stepped in front of the door, his shadow filling the hallway. "You're not going anywhere. Not until you take her," he barked. My chest tightened again, but this time it wasn't panic, it was determination. I looked him square in the eyes. "I'm going to this interview whether you like it or not," I said. The words felt heavy and powerful, like a lifeline thrown into a storm I had been trapped in for years. He lunged for my arm, but I twisted free, heart hammering, and stepped outside. The cold morning air hit me like a slap, but it was welcome, sharp, real, and mine. I didn't look back. For the first time in my life, I wasn't looking for permission, approval, or even a sign that they cared. I walked down the driveway, every step shaking off the weight of their control. I called Harper, my college roommate, the only person who had ever truly believed I wasn't disposable. Her voice was immediate and warm. "Sophie? Are you okay?" she asked. I swallowed, my lips tight. "Not yet. But I will be. I need a ride, he's trying to stop me." There was no hesitation. "Text me your address. I'll be there in 10. Don't go back inside. Stay visible." And for the first time that morning, I felt it. Power. Not the false kind they tried to instill through fear, control, and punishment. Real power, the kind that comes from choosing yourself, no matter who tries to trap you. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew one thing. Today, I was no longer theirs to control. When Harper pulled up in her silver SUV, I felt a strange mix of relief and lingering anger. She rolled down the window, her eyes immediately assessing me, like she already knew the chaos I'd just escaped. "What did they do this time?" she asked, voice tight but steady. I exhaled sharply. "They tried to make me cancel the interview. Dad shoved me against the wall. Told me my future never mattered. Lila just watched." I didn't add the part about the bruises forming across my shoulder. They were a silent, burning reminder I didn't need to explain. Harper didn't react with shock. She reacted with controlled anger, the kind that makes you feel safe, like someone has your back in a storm. "We're going to fix this," she said firmly. "And they're not going to get another chance to hurt you." As we drove downtown, she helped me rehearse my interview questions, corrected my posture, adjusted my collar, and even reminded me to breathe. Every small gesture grounded me, but also reminded me how long it had been since anyone had truly had my back. When we reached the lobby, glass and marble gleaming under bright light, I felt the contrast between this world and the one I had just left. The place my parents claimed I'd never belong in suddenly seemed possible. Every step toward the elevator felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that had been chained for years. And yet, a shadow of doubt lingered. I couldn't shake the feeling that my parents wouldn't let this go quietly. They were experts at control, at manipulation. But as Harper whispered, "You earned this. They won't stop you today." I realized something important. I wasn't going to let them. Not today. Not ever again. The lobby smelled like polished marble and ambition, every echo of my footsteps sounding louder than it should. I clutched my portfolio like a shield, Harper's steady gaze on me giving me strength I didn't realize I'd lost. "You belong here," she whispered again, and for the first time, I actually felt it. The interview room was sleek and intimidating, glass walls, minimalist design, the kind of place my parents would have scoffed at me for even stepping foot in. I reminded myself, this wasn't just an interview. This was my statement, my declaration that I wouldn't let them define my worth anymore. I sat down, the panel of recruiters staring expectantly. I could feel the residual anger and fear from this morning threatening to spill out, but I focused, rehearsed words flowing naturally. Every question I answered, every example I gave, was precise and controlled. Harper's voice echoed in my mind, "You earned this. They won't stop you today." Somewhere in the back of my mind, though, a chill lingered. I had no proof yet, but I suspected my father had already started meddling. He had a way of planting seeds of doubt, and I knew the world he moved in, the connections, the whispered power, the people who thought his word was law. But for now, I pushed it aside. 47 minutes later, I walked out of that room with my head high. I had given everything, held nothing back, and for the first time, I felt like I belonged somewhere that wasn't defined by their rules, their cruelty, or their dismissal. I could almost taste freedom. But freedom, I realized, wasn't guaranteed. Not yet. Somewhere in the shadows of my mind, I knew they wouldn't let this go quietly. And this time, I wasn't just prepared to fight for a job, I was preparing to fight for my life, my future, and my voice. I thought walking out of that interview would feel like victory. For a moment, it did, just a sliver of it. But the moment my phone buzzed with messages from Lila, I felt the storm I had just escaped creeping back. "You ruined everything. You're so selfish. You're dead to us," she typed, one message after another. I stared at the screen, numb, realizing that my parents had already started their campaign to control me, even from a distance. That night, Harper helped me piece things together. The recruiter I had met whispered caution. My father had already called HR, claiming I was mentally unstable, unpredictable, even violent. His voice, full of authority in someone else's office, threatened to erase every accomplishment, every careful step I'd taken to prove myself. I sank into Harper's couch, stomach twisting. The familiar panic, the one that had always chained me to fear, crept up. But Harper's hand on mine, her steady eyes, grounded me. "We're not letting them win this time," she said, calm but sharp. That was the first time I truly understood that this fight wasn't just about a job. It was about taking back control of my life, my name, my very existence. We stayed up late, poring over emails, notes, and phone records, piecing together the threads of my father's interference. He wasn't just trying to stop me, he was trying to destroy me before I even had a chance to step into my own future. I felt a cold fury settling in, something sharper than anger. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about making sure they could never touch me again, and this time, I would hit back smart. That night, I slept with one eye open, not out of fear, but out of planning. Tomorrow, I decided, I wasn't just going to survive. I was going to reclaim every piece of power they had tried to steal. The next morning, I woke with a cold, focused clarity that surprised me. The fear that had clawed at my chest the day before was gone, replaced by a hunger I hadn't felt in years, the need to protect my future, my reputation, my life. Harper handed me a folder across her small kitchen table. Inside were copies of emails, screenshots of Lila's smug messages, and the recruiter's note about my father's calls. I stared at it all, numb for a second, before anger and resolve kicked in. They really think they can ruin me? I muttered, almost to myself. Harper's eyes met mine, sharp and unyielding. They can't. Not if we do this right. We're going to hit them where it hurts, and legally. No tears. No emotion. Just facts. We spent hours crafting a plan. Everything had to be precise, formal complaints, documented timelines, attached evidence. No room for missteps. I realized how long I had spent crying over things I couldn't control, letting their words and actions define my value. But now I was taking the reins. I wasn't the powerless girl they had always assumed I was. I recorded a mental checklist, verify every call, document every text, track every attempt at interference. Harper guided me through wording, tone, strategy. Every detail mattered. This wasn't about revenge in the dramatic sense. It was about survival, reputation, and ensuring they could never sabotage me again. By the end of the night, I felt different. Not lighter, not unburdened, but armed. I wasn't just preparing to protect my dream job anymore. I was preparing to reclaim my life. And this time, I knew they would face consequences that were precise, permanent, and impossible to ignore. The next morning, I felt a strange mix of nerves and determination as Harper guided me through sending the formal complaint. Every word had been measured, every attachment carefully included, the recruiter's note, Lila's messages, copies of my father's voicemail threats. I paused before hitting send, my finger hovering over the button. For a moment, I thought about backing down, about letting it slide like I had for years. But I didn't. I pressed send, and a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying lifted slightly. This wasn't drama. This was justice. This was reclaiming the part of me they had always tried to control. Harper smiled at me, quiet but proud. "You did the right thing," she said. Within 48 hours, the first signs of change started. The company HR responded immediately, opening an investigation and suspending any contact between my father and their hiring team. My heart raced, not with fear this time, but with something sharper, satisfaction. I wasn't celebrating, because this was only the beginning, but I allowed myself a small sense of relief. For the first time in years, I felt the power of documentation, of strategy, of standing firm. I realized they had always underestimated me, thinking my fear and compliance were weakness. But I had learned to channel the anger, the pain, and the humiliation into something precise and unstoppable. That night, as I lay in Harper's tiny guest room, shoulders still sore from the shove that started it all, I felt a strange calm. They had tried to erase me, to make me invisible, but now I was standing, not just for a job, but for my life. And this time, I wasn't leaving any piece of myself behind. 2 weeks later, the first real consequences started rolling in. HR called me into a private meeting, apologizing for the chaos and assuring me that the position was mine, with protections in place. They explained that my complaint had triggered a wider review, not just of my father's interference, but of his reputation in the industry. I sat there, quiet, letting it sink in. My father, the man who had tried to convince me I was worthless, was suddenly facing scrutiny from the very circles he used to manipulate. My mother called later, voice tight with panic, begging, pleading, trying the old tricks she had always used to control me. But I had learned something crucial. I couldn't let their fear or guilt dictate my actions anymore. "You don't get to set my life on fire and ask me to save you from the smoke," I told her, and I meant it. That line felt heavier than any punishment they had ever handed down. For years, I had been carrying the weight of their expectations, their manipulations, their relentless belief that I was disposable. Now, the scales had shifted. I moved into my own apartment shortly after, tiny but mine, the bruises on my shoulder fading, but the clarity in my mind sharper than ever. Lila's angry messages stopped when her friends started distancing themselves from the family drama, and my father's voice on the phone, once booming and commanding, had turned small and sharp with fear. For the first time in my life, I slept without bracing for the next storm. They had tried to define my value, but I had learned that value could be reclaimed not with revenge, but with truth, persistence, and refusing to be anyone's pawn. And for the first time, I felt fully free. The day I received the official offer letter, complete with relocation package, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: pure, unshakable relief. I didn't call my parents. I didn't need their approval, their validation, or their guilt trips. I had worked for this moment, fought for it, and finally earned it on my own terms. Packing my small apartment, I noticed the faint bruise on my shoulder, a lingering mark of what I had endured. But instead of anger or sadness, I felt pride. That mark was a reminder of my strength, of every time I had refused to be silenced, to be dismissed, to be treated as disposable. Lila's messages had stopped. My father's phone calls now carried caution instead of control. And my mother, well, she had learned the hard way that manipulation could no longer reach me. I realized, as I zipped my suitcase, that freedom isn't just stepping away, it's owning your life in full, even when the people who should have nurtured you try to pull it from your hands. I boarded the bus 2 days later, one-way ticket in hand. Outside the window, the familiar streets blurred into the past. For the first time, I wasn't running from anyone, I was moving toward everything I had ever wanted. As the city skyline appeared in the distance, I felt a quiet smile spread across my face. They had taught me that I was disposable. I had taught myself and them that my life, my dreams, my voice were not only valuable, but untouchable. And this time, I didn't look back.